Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paddocks. This episode, we're talking about the Australian Grand Prix. We are back down under. On the episode, we have KC, Melissa, myself, Chelsea, and Hannah behind the scenes. Now, just a few updates on this track for this season's race. You may have noticed we got to watch the Grand Prix a little earlier this year, so we weren't completely knocked out by the end. And the race was bumped up due to the drivers complaining about poor visibility at last year's race. You know, the sun going down and everything. Now, the FIA has also noted them down with an extension until about 2035. And next year, you're going to be seeing this race as the season opener. So, yay, I'm so excited. We're going to start over there. Now, we're going to go to the Grand Prix. It was honestly a really great weekend. I think we can all agree Australia is one of our favorite personality weekends. Like, this is where everyone is just themselves and they're completely let loose to do that, which we'll talk about later. But first, we have to welcome back Carlos Sainz to the track. He was able to drive for the Australian GP after dealing with his appendicitis and surgery from a couple weeks back.
I'm going to need to talk to Carlos about his little surgery recovery because that man is something else to bounce back that quickly. But I wanted to mention Joe's helmet for this weekend was, to me, amazing. That man literally had a picture of Bottas and put on his helmet with the whole mullet spiel and everything. And I personally really love this team duo so much. It's probably one of my favorites. But my favorite little detail on Joe's helmet was just a little koala bear drinking his boba. It was a cute little thing, and I was just like, love that. It's a little bit of Australia, but it's like a little bit of like that Asian culture in there too. So it's like loved how that was mixed in.
I mean, Valtteri this whole weekend is truly embracing the Aussie lifestyle. I don't know if you saw the ads he's done. They are so funny. Like, they're the greatest thing I've ever seen. And he was like judging, he had like a mullet judging contest at some of the fan stages. Like, he truly looks like he's living his best life every time he comes to Australia. And I think he's mentioned, like, it's basically like a home race for him. I think his girlfriend's from Australia, so he spends a lot of time there. And it's just always fun to see like them having fun someplace. And then speaking of helmets, I also loved Oscar's home race helmet. I don't know, it was just really pretty. It had like sunset orange with the black and like subtle nods to Australian culture. So it kind of like fit in with McLaren, but it was just different enough. Honestly, it was one of my favorites because it was pretty like a sunset.
It was very pretty, and I do love a good sunset. Now, just a fact, not sure if it's a fun fact, but this was the first race of the season where they brought out those C5 tires. So, in case you guys want to note that down, have it on your bingo card, I don't know. Also, we have 3 home race people this weekend. I also am going to include Bottas in that. There's no Finland race, so this is like also as close as he's going to get in my head. You know what? Aussie, Finland, I don't know. This is as close as he's going to get to it. We're giving it to him. The real home people, though, Danny and Oscar, it was great that I think they got to go their home race. I'm so glad that Danny was back on the track because I'm sure last year was a bit of an emotional hit to not be able to drive his first time in the home race. And I do love seeing Oscar's family come out and support. I think it's very sweet to get Grandma's biscuits out on the grid.
They need to drop the recipe on those biscuits because they look bomb. But going into race weekend, first off, in FP1, we saw Alex get into a pretty nasty accident causing damage to the chassis of the car. And ultimately, Williams didn't bring any extra parts or chassis to fix said car. And Alex was left with no car to drive for the weekend. But what does the team decide to do? Emphasis on team. They decided that Logan would not be participating for the rest of the weekend and Alex instead would be driving his car. I personally get the decision for the sake of points, but I feel like it's just totally unfair to Logan. I know I would be upset and it would make me feel a type of way towards the team entirely, not necessarily like Alex, but probably like more like the higher ups being like, do you guys not have like some sort of faith in me or something? So feel for him, really.
Yeah, it's a pretty horrible situation for Logan, basically getting punished for his teammate crashing the car. But I mean, props to him though. He's shown like a lot of class and character, just kind of being a supportive teammate and showing up in the garage and still doing his job. Like, I would just be crying in the corner if that happened to me. Like, that sounds horrible. But, it must be really hard to just put a smiling face knowing your team doesn't really have the confidence that you can drive and score points and, still being a team player with that. So good job, Logan.
I just want to say, drop the mic, Casey. Because, yeah, he was punished basically for Alex messing up. And I think it hurts, man. Because, like, as an American, we want to support this man so much. And, we know he's not the best. Okay, we're all very aware. But the man tries his best. And we're also aware of that. Every race, he really does try. He wants to get the points for Williams. And he actually already did it this season. So, like, he's doing it. He's trying. And it sucks that, this weekend he didn't even get the opportunity to really show what he could do at the Australian GP. Because he only got one shot if we're considering last year. And yeah, it was funny. I mean, they were making jokes with Alex saying like, oh, happy birthday, Alex. Here's Logan's car. Which I get it. But I just feel like there had to have been a better way to do this. I think the honorary thing to do would have just been, Alex, you don't have a car. Like, I feel like that's how it should have gone. Especially because, I mean, we're going to talk about it, but Alex didn't even get points this weekend. So, at the end of the day, was their decision even worth it? And if anything, it just showed a little kind of like viewpoint into how their team works. And it's like, is that the best way to work your team? So, it was interesting.
I did like how F1 Twitter just had a heyday and were like defending Logan all the way through, and people were like, I'm not even a fan of the team or of him in particular, and like people were just saying how crappy the situation was and everything. I'm like, yes, like people understand, like it's not the right thing, I guess. I don't even know what to say. Like it's just a sucky situation. It just sucks it happened to him. And I just love that everyone was just like, no, like this is wrong, and we're gonna let you guys know that this is wrong. And then like Chelsea had said, like it kind of gives a different point of view of the team, but also I feel like the team principal too, because I know everyone held James to like a high standard, and now it's just kind of like, But again, I mean, it is his job to make those hard decisions, but like still.
And I almost completely forgot. I even wrote it down. There was like American fans that went to the Australian Grand Prix, I guess. And specifically, there was this one person that went viral on Twitter and social media because she was an American going to her first Grand Prix ever to watch Logan race. And then, obviously that didn't happen. But with Williams basically just getting, shots left or right on social media, they kind of made this girl go viral, and she was able to meet Logan, meet the team, hang out in the garage. So, shitty move by them, but at least the marketing team helped the nice girl have a great day. I think it was a girl, but it was cool.
Yeah, it definitely was nice that they did that. I hope she had a fun time in the garage while she was hanging out with Logan. Had that cool, like, one-on-one time you wouldn't normally get. But going on to quali, my favorite part of the weekend, personally, I like seeing the little knockout stuff. In Q1, we did see Zhou, Ricciardo, Gasly, and Hulkenberg get knocked out. And unfortunately for Danny, this was his first time being knocked out at Melbourne, his home race, due to his final lap time being deleted.
I felt bad for Danny. I mean, you take a year off, you don't get to race, you come back, you're trying to do some big moves on home soil, and then your big moves got deleted. That sucks.
And then into Q2, we saw Ocon, Magnussen, Bottas, Albon, and Hamilton all eliminated. An honorable mention, though, to Oscar, who got P2 during this session at his home race. I think that's pretty epic right there. It just goes to show what Oscar can be in the future of his F1 career. And sadly for Lewis's P11 spot, it was his lowest at this track since 2010. It's pretty rough. That's all I can say.
Yeah, Lance knocking Hamilton out at the very last second of Q2 was crazy. And I think that's like the fun part about qualifying, is that you truly don't know who's going to make it until like the very last second, because it could be anyone. Because, the lower people like Yuki and the RB, you wouldn't necessarily consider, like a top team, but whenever they knock someone out, it's so exciting, to see someone from one of those like midfieldish teams knocking out the top people.
We do love a nice turn of events during quali. I like when that stuff happens to her. It's fun. I'm like, ooh, okay. And then finally in Q3, Max takes pole, followed by Carlos in P2 and Checo, who took P3 originally, but then received a 3-place grid penalty due to impeding Hulkenberg. And then the top 10 looked like this. Max and Carlos in the front row, followed by Lando in P3, then Charles, Piastri, Checo, and P6, if you're keeping track, followed by Russell, Yuki, Stroll, and Alonso in P10. And then now into our lovely midnight race for us stateside people. From what I saw, Max definitely had a great start to the race. It gave him the lead right into turn 1. However, by lap 2, Carlos took the lead and things were starting to get so interesting. I personally was very comfortable in bed and I pulled one of those, wait, hold up, like got really focused playing the video game move where it's like, okay, what is happening? But it actually turned out that Max was having issues with his car and it was smoking. And there's like a little video of him like pulling into the pit lane where you kind of see like the tire, like it's something goes pop. And it was pretty scary because I was thinking about like, thank God, like at least it was somewhere not on track where it can been like a little bit worse or something. So I'm glad that Max being Max, he made it back into the pit lanes, which I wasn't surprised by him. Yeah, so that was my lap 5 and literally anything was possible by then.
I'm sorry, it's sad, but with Max out of the way, it's an exciting race. Like anything is possible. You're right, Melissa. Like you see that shit and you're like, ah, yes, now I get to watch a race.
Yeah, it looks like Max was having some major brake issues, almost like driving with like the e-brake on or the handbrake, which I've definitely done on accident many times because I forget it exists. But I think like definitely like things were on fire. Like I saw a picture of like a tire just on fire on the ground. And then I think when he hit the brakes to hit like the pit speed limit, that's when like the big explosion happened where it literally just came like rocketing out of the side of the wheel into the like wall area, which luckily was there. So it didn't like hit anybody. But it's crazy that, it took 2 years for Max to have a mechanical DNF. Like, just think about, like, in the old days of F1, you had, like, DNFs and mechanical issues, like, every race. And now, you know, it took 2 years for him to have a mechanical DNF. So not only is the Red Bull a rocket ship, but it's also a reliable one.
No, you are so right, because the first mechanical DNF since 2022, like, that is something for them to be so wildly proud of, because, wow. You know, you see teams like Alpine, for example, Williams, you see teams like even McLaren, Red Bull, whatever he's doing, that little magic that he has, which I would like him to sprinkle on other cars, is just going very well. And I think it really sucks for them to have this DNF. Again, was it exciting? Yes, but it's also it's shit luck when he was in P1. Like he could have had P1. If he had been starting in the back or something, then, oh, okay, that sucks. But like he was up there. And also, P was there. I almost forgot. Little P was watching her first ever Grand Prix race in person to like watch Max race. So I think that sucks that, you know, she didn't really get to like see Max race like he could have done. Because we sadly all know if he raced, it would have been a Max race.
Now that you mentioned P, Chels, I did see a video when they were in the garage. I don't know if it was before the race or when it was, but she was starting to touch the wing and you see like Max go into like dad mode and being like, don't touch it because they're going to fine us like whatever, like thousands like of dollars or euros. And he's like, and normal toys for you. And she's like, oh, okay. Like she just sits up. But it's funny because like you can tell she's just curious. Like she's just aimlessly like touching it. Like I know like I would touch like random things, like not thinking about it at that age. So it's like, it's kind of funny how he was just like, no more toys, like super dad mode. However, afterwards, Carlos did start to build up that gap between him and Lando super nicely. And overall, it was just a great drive from Carlos so far. And it was really pleasing just to see him kind of just get away in that red Ferrari. And by lap 17, however, Lewis is out of the race due to some engine issues. Mercedes, ¿qué pasa? What is going on? Like, I need them to get it together because I love Lewis. I like George. And I just want those top teams to do better. And it just hurts to see the legacy that they've built up just kind of tumbling down in these recent years. And those pit stops from Sauber were hard to watch. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's crazy because the drivers from Sauber will be doing so well in the race before yet another botched pit stop. I think they've had at least one bad pit stop at every race this year. Like, they're 3 for 3, which is crazy. So I think they really need to get together here because they get, like, fined every time they screw it up. But the drivers must be so frustrated that their races are being ruined by something that isn't their fault and they can't even control. Like, that's completely out of their hands. They have to trust their team will actually do the pit stop correctly and quickly.
No, you are actually completely right. Well, so Kick was investigated for the pit stop this race because sadly it was really just a botched job, and it's been a botched job at every race. This time, the wheel nut popped out of the gun, rode onto the fast lane, which potentially was, the path of the other cars. So there was a report made to the FIA stewards on safety grounds. Obviously, it was the team's fault, so they got fined 5,000 euros. The problem was, when I started looking into this, okay, so the thing is, before the race even started, I think it was like Thursday, Joe was already saying that they've been having issues with the pit stops and like they're very much aware of it. But the problem is, every time they test and practice, even in winter testing before the season started, they were good. Like, the pit stops were going well. But it seems every time the race weekend starts, they just can't handle the pressure. Like, it just makes them drop things, which has been like the consistent thing. It's apparently been like a wheel nut at almost every race. So I guess maybe they need to take that guy's wheel nut gun and give it to someone else. But it really sucks because they think it's going to be an ongoing issue. They're just going to keep practicing at this point because there's nothing else they can do, because they're not able to, I guess, create a whole new team, obviously, before the next race. So they're just kind of hoping that with more consistent practice, they can get a more consistent pit stop for the races, because you're absolutely right. They costed Bottas points today with the 30-second pit stop, or 28-second.
They need to poner las pilas, like get it together, because it's embarrassing for the team as a whole. And I really feel for both drivers because, again, it's stuff that's not even their own fault. Like, what can you say? But then later on, about like halfway through the race, we saw some team orders come into play, and Oscar was told to switch positions with Lando, as Lando was the faster driver out of the two at that moment.
Well, I get why they ordered the switch, because obviously, they want to maximize the points and they wanted, Lando to go after the Ferraris. But I was so hoping for an Oscar home race podium to break the Aussie podium curse, where technically, like, they've been up there, but then I think Danny, like, got disqualified. And then I think they just kind of threw up Mark up there just for fun. But it makes sense. And then we actually also saw team orders with the Ferraris. Ferrari seems incapable of giving Charles a car that, like, is set up properly, because he had issues again, just like in Bahrain. But he still had some pace. I wish we could have seen the Ferraris, fight a little bit. It's still so early in the championship that there's, it would have been fun to see them, you can try to go fight each other, but then, we'll settle in after the fact. But, they made me think of, like, the Seb and, like, the Multi-21 stuff where he just ignored team orders. So it'll be interesting to see if eventually, if it really is, like, a close championship fight, if we'll see, anyone pulling a Multi-21 where they basically just ignore the team orders and go for first. Especially because if Charles won today, he would be leading the World Championship, which would be the first time that Max hadn't been leading the championship in what seems like forever. But he is second, so hopefully it won't be Max running away with it this year, and that someone will challenge him. But it was a great race from Carlos, though, especially recovering from surgery and having to be put under, and he had, like, all the extra, like, I don't know, padding and, like, gauze or whatever it was to, like, protect I guess the incision point. But I don't know if you saw, I think his cousin posted, someone gave him, like, a little, like, stuffed appendix, like, keychain thing. And that they all, like, loved it because it was so funny. But yeah, it would just been fun to, see teammates fight it out a little bit.
I agree, Casey. I would have loved a little fight between C squared at the front of the grid. I think it would have been a little bit, it would have brought some excitement and everything. And it's, again, not to like discredit Carlos, because again, he was having one hell of a drive. But Charles being Charles too, he takes that car to like levels that shouldn't be at too. So it's like seeing those two kind of like duke it out would have definitely been fun. A good clean fight, early on, something, a little spice. But right at the last lap, literally right on the last lap, we saw George crash. And that was a scary one, to say the least. And thankfully, he is okay. But what shook me to the core was that radio message, because it was pretty much him begging for a red flag. And I can just only imagine how terrified he felt to come on the radio and express that need for a red flag, like, as soon as possible.
Yeah, especially because the way he had crashed had the car, like the wheels like wedged underneath the car and had it tipped on its side in the middle of the track after a blind corner that, you're going reasonably fast at, with the bottom of the car facing incoming traffic. And it was basically the perfect setup to be T-boned in the weakest and most vulnerable place of the car, as the floor is not really reinforced. It's pretty thin. Unlike the sides and the top, which have special like safety structures and crumple zones and all sorts of stuff, the halo. But the bottom is completely vulnerable, and that's the first thing someone would hit. And especially because the drivers sit so close to the bottom. We saw that when Carlos hit the drain cover in Vegas, and, he like could feel it, and, legs got a little bit tingly because that little tiny drain cover basically almost destroyed the car. So you can only imagine what basically just getting pierced with the nose of an F1 car would be like. So I think we're very lucky that, nothing happened, because like that could have easily been a fatal accident. And I'm surprised it didn't get immediately red flagged. I guess the virtual safety car, I don't know, might have been easier because they can trigger that instantly. But I think the red flag would have, at least psychologically, like, I don't know, made all the other drivers aware that, it's something serious. Because earlier in the race, when Lewis pulled off, he pulled off to a pretty good spot, where they could just drag the car off. That was also a virtual safety car. So, like, that compared to George's, accident were two very different situations. And luckily, like, Lance Stroll was, like, right behind him, but he was far enough back, and his race engineer, Ben Mitchell, was pretty on top of it with letting him know, like, you need to slow down, like, now. It's very serious. Be very careful trying to, like, go around this corner, and, George is just right there. But you could even hear the panic in, like, his voice as well when he was giving instructions to, avoid the accident. But that's also, it was his last race as a race engineer, too, so he's done a great job until the end, but he's actually being promoted to the head of performance optimization. But it just proves how important race engineers are with, keeping everyone safe on track.
Yeah, I think listening to the audio was just kind of like heavy. He sounded really terrified, and after listening to that, I wasn't, obviously, like, what we feel doesn't matter, but like I wasn't feeling well that like the FIA had just thrown up the virtual, because I was like, holy shit, like, that man's literally sounded like he was begging for his life, and you guys are just like, here's a little virtual flag. But what really ended up being the discussion of the accident was what happened before the accident. And it was that basically Alonso and George, they were really tight, and I know Alonso and George have different opinions of what went down, but basically Alonso was arguing that he knew George was behind him on DRS, but he also wasn't exactly paying attention to like what was going on behind him either. So he was just trying to push on his last lap. And if you watch the race, you'll see that Alonso brakes like 100 meters off the turn. And basically George he had no time to brake correctly, and he was right up behind him. So he slid off into the gravel, and that's how the accident happened. Now, this went to the FIA. They did an investigation, and it said that like basically Alonso's brake speed from the lap before that was like completely different to the brake speed in the one where George had the accident. So Alonso did end up getting penalized 20 seconds, and he lost his position. So he went down to P8 in the final standing. And sadly, because of that accident, Mercedes was completely out of the lineup for the Australian GP after that. So it sucks because they did try interviewing George after. They're like, are you okay? Like, what did you think about the accident? Do you think Alonso brake checked you? And he's like, I don't know. Like, I'm not going to say anything, but like, if you see the cameras, like, he did brake really early, and he did. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what Alonso was thinking. I don't know if he really didn't realize how close George was, but it was definitely not something I wanted to see at 1:58 in the morning. And I'm really happy that George was able to just climb out of that.
Yeah, I don't blame George for not wanting to discuss what happened, because I can just imagine like how he felt. And again, a lot of times these interviews are done when the drivers are still feeling those emotions post-race. So props to George for being calm, cool, and collective, because anyone else could have been like, it was all Alonso, he brake checked me, like how, like all this stuff, and like it could turn into like this whole drama thing. But again, super, super happy like he is okay. It should have been at least a safety car, not a virtual one, but I am not the stewards. I am not the FIA, and they're going to FIA when they want to FIA, unfortunately. So yeah, but Carlos wins the race with Charles in P2 and Lando closing out the podium in P3. Love that for us.
And we got double points for Haas of all teams. They're really growing on me after Kevin was absolute terror on track in Jeddah with his like 40 seconds of penalties, just doing what he could to get, Nico a point. I was like, look at that teamwork, So it's just crazy. It's always fun to root for like the underdog team. And I think they truly are, because like Gene Haas gives them negative money at this point and they're barely holding it together as a team. So it's always kind of nice that sometimes they can do well, And Yuki also got points. And I think he moved up a place too when Alonso got penalized, so he got even more points. And he drove really well this weekend, and I think he's proving that he deserves his seat, because people are always talking about that, and that I think he's trying to prove that, hey, you should consider me for that second Red Bull seat. Like, look at how well I'm doing in a car that's a midfield car. So hopefully if he keeps this up, we'll see the competition for that second seat heat up a bit.
I am happy I stayed up for the race. I did fall asleep at the last 8 laps because, well, it was almost 2 a.m. here, and I am a grandma when it comes to my sleep. Literally fell asleep and then woke up to Carlos jumping to the Ferrari pit crew with his congratulations. I was like, okay, awesome. But I will say, as I did feel bad for Maxi and Effin, because we don't like that happening. I am glad it did bring some excitement to the race, because I do love a good, exciting battle for P1. And again, it was truly anyone's game, and it came down to those lovely pit stops and strategies, and I'm glad Ferrari got it right. Super, super glad. I am happy to see both my drivers taking that 1-2 victory. Again, Lando with his little champagne pop. Love that. And again, it's just a stellar drive from Carlos. That man said, let me get my appendix out, come back, and came back even stronger. And maybe we're going to see other drivers get rid of their appendix soon, because I would not be surprised if that happens.
And I can start a little support group, Alex, Carlos, like who's next? But I mean, as a Red Bull fan, it was a bit sad to have Max just go out so early due to a mechanical failure. Because it looks like the Ferraris had real pace. Like Carlos, passed him, on merit in that first bit. So I think it would have been really fun to see them, fight it out for 58 laps, because I think they could have done it. I think, Red Bull wasn't, way far ahead of everyone else this race. So I hope that's like a good sign going forward, that we're going to have, more of a competitive season and have, other teams fighting for wins as well. But Australia always delivers an interesting race, so it's always, worth it to stay up a bit later. And it looks like, the whole field was kind of getting closer together. So it was pretty much anyone's guess as to kind of, what the rest of the order was going to be, which is always fun because the midfield battles are also entertaining.
Well, okay, so speaking of those mid teams and speaking of Red Bull, I wanted to bring up RB because I noticed this weekend, and actually I've kind of noticed it every weekend since the season started, and I guess we were all going to expect it, but there are just some things happening in their step cousin, I don't know, garages that I just want to talk about. For those who might not know, Yuki was going into this weekend under some stress from the higher ups at RB. There was an article that went out on Thursday on Formula One, and basically he had talked with the boss for RB, which is Laurent, about his driving development before the weekend, and basically that they're just monitoring his progress. The problem was there was this quote that irked me, and I'm so sorry if you're a Danny fan. It has really nothing to do with Danny, but they're basically using Daniel as this, quotations, fantastic reference point. And I just don't think that that's what they should be doing. Now, obviously, we want to give Danny leeway because he was off the track for a bit, but we're already 3 races in. He's behind Yuki, no points, and we're 2 out of the 3 races. Again, we're super early, but I'm just saying Danny could possibly, and don't hang me, be past his prime. And I wish the teams would just focus on them both equally as drivers instead of putting Yuki up against Danny. Because at the end of the day right now, Yuki might be the better driver for the team.
I agree. I love Danny personality-wise. I don't really know much of him as a driver because when I got into the sport, it was during that time of McLaren where it wasn't that great. So I know he was like, he's a race winner and everything at the end of the day, but I don't like that they put 2 bad Bs against each other because they shouldn't. And I feel like if they weren't doing that, their relationship would be so much better, like as teammates, and as chaotic as they both individually are. Can you imagine them chaotic together? But I, for one, am proud of Yuki for showing out and everything. Hopefully it'll give Danny a bit of a drive to do better. And who knows, maybe it is just a car and Danny's trying his best. We'll never know if we ever know. But I'm just, the media, the fans, and the team is just kind of annoying that they keep on putting them against one another.
Yeah, I think at this point, the main focus should just be, scoring as much points as possible in the team to get them up in the constructors, because obviously the higher up in the constructors you are, the more money you get, which is good for any team. And I think just both drivers are under such pressure because, there's always the carrot dangled of, oh, that second Red Bull seat. But then also you have Liam Lawson, who proved that, he is pretty good, who's also on the sidelines. So I think they're just under so much pressure right now that it's not helping putting them against each other. I think they should, just focus on doing the best you can. Danny getting familiar with the car because, it's his first, full season with the team. And Yuki just, keep improving and all of that. But I just think the whole situation, Red Bull's known for, putting a little bit too much pressure on their drivers as an organization. But I think it must be hard because, we're only 3 races into the season and there's 24. We have a long way to go.
Yeah. And I know we have another race coming up in a couple weeks, which I personally think will be a big day for RB boys because it's going to be a home race for one of them. So, I know Melissa has some predictions we can start with.
Yeah, Suzuka is the next race. And personally, I think Max will be out for vengeance. In typical Max fashion. This track is actually one of my favorite ones, but it always stresses me out because of the weather. But luckily they changed the scheduling this year, made it earlier in the year. I think because when they originally scheduled, I think it's during their monsoon season, something like that. So I'm interested in how the weather will play out because we haven't had a wet race yet for this season. So excited to see how it turns out. So my predictions for that weekend, of course, P1 for Max. And based on today's performance, I will say Charles and Carlos will be probably taking P2 and P3. No particular driver in which spot either one really, I will be happy. I would prefer P1 for Charles, so both Ferrari boys can have a win so far this season. But I am biased because that is one of my favorite drivers. However, I would love to see a McLaren up there and a Mercedes, for the love of God. I need them to start improving. Mercedes, I'm looking right at you, Toto. What is up? What is good? What do you need? Because I have some complaints. We got a water bottle, and the paint on the water bottle faded in my backpack. So what are y'all doing with my money from that water bottle? Please. Jokes aside, but yeah, no, it's been a rough start to the season for Mercedes, and it's not been easy at all. Because I want to support them. I want to support Lewis to do well. I want to support George as well too. But it's just like, that's all. I don't have words anymore.
I'm actually really excited for the, I guess, season change for the Japan race, because it's cherry blossom season in Japan right now. So I'm curious, I think it'll be really cool, like graphics wise. I'm curious what the teams are going to do with the posters, incorporate cherry blossoms into all of that. But I'm not really familiar with how Japan's weather works, so I don't really know how this time of year will affect like the track temp or, the weather patterns. So I guess it's kind of an unknown for everybody, including the teams, of what the track's going to be like, in April versus, the fall. But I definitely agree with Mo that Max will be out to prove himself after, Australia. I think last year after he lost to Checo and Baca, he was like, never again. I'm never losing to him again. So I think he'll definitely get to that point where he's like, yeah, no, I'm back to winning again. So he'll be most likely P1. But I really feel like Ferrari and McLaren, I think in the right situation, they could really fight pretty evenly together. So I think it might be a toss-up for P2 and P3 between, those four drivers. Personally, I would love a Charles P2, Oscar P3. And in all honesty, I just want a race where Sauber doesn't mess up their pit stops. That would be great.
And those are shots fired by Casey at Sauber throughout the whole episode. Now, I think Japan is going to be a really fun race. I'm really excited to see if Yuki's home race is kind of like that magic push he needs to stay in the points. And then on top of that, maybe even be wild and make a podium, maybe. On to my real predictions, though, I do see Max with P1. Look, if the car is up to par and he can get away from that little fire incident this weekend, there's literally no doubt to me where Max is going to be. So that one's out of my hands. Second, this one's in my hands. I would really like to see McLaren. Now, I just want to see them reel that in. Specifically Lando, but I know Oscar can do an amazing job. We've seen it before. So if Oscar wants to go up there and just keep going up that driver championship as his second year career, do it. It's amazing. Now, third, I want to have fun. I think we've seen a lot of the top 5 teams kind of kicking ass, and I would like to see Mercedes do that. So if they want to have fun, I would like to see Lewis make third. He will probably be on the same page as Max. He will want to prove his worth after DNFing this weekend. I think George will too, because I don't think Mercedes will take the disrespect of being out of a weekend race twice. So I hope they make a really good comeback for the next race. And I think it's going to be exciting to see everyone just kind of on top of it, because the midfield, the front field, they are out for vengeance in every race, I think, after Red Bull beating everyone last season.
And to close out the episode, we have a team of the week for you. And who does it go to? None other, Ferrari, for their 1-2 finish with a constructor win for the Grand Prix. Go ahead, Ferrari.
Now, I still honestly can't get over the fact that we are back to racing and the excitement that it brings me. Let's be honest. What was your favorite moment from the weekend? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere, we're Paddock Girls Podcast, except for Twitter, where you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. Thank you for joining us in the paddock. See you in Suzuka. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.